Kristen, thanks so much for being on Parent Tech. I discovered your podcast, Culture Kids, through the Yodo. My daughter and I are huge fans. It is often used in long car rides. We just chain the episodes together. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's an incredible show. People should listen. Wonderful sound design. Give us just a little brief overview of what is Culture Kids? Why did you start it? What do you hope it achieves?
Yeah, so Culture Kids is actually really an audio immersive adventure. The purpose is to help children and their families kind of feel like they're taking an adventure anywhere across the world or even time travel just using audio and sound effects. So it helps with imagination, sense of adventure, and it just helps kids to imagine some of the topics that we're learning about really just using pure sound. So I think that's kind of the magic of what we do, and it's educational, and we collaborate with lots of different cultural organizations, authors, and educators from all over the world. So there's that level of authenticity of the materials that children are consuming. So yeah, it's a lot of fun.
I love that. Both the sound design, I learn things when we're listening, and then I also love that you always bring on somebody from that culture, that organization, that it's a really great touch.
Thank you. Yeah, I think the reason why it resonates so much with parents, especially, is that there's that mother son dynamic. It's co hosted by me and my 8-year-old son, Asher. He started when he was 5. So he asks a lot of questions from a child's perspective. But they're all kind of questions that a lot of adults are always wondering too, but we're
They're
probably
good.
too shy to ask, right?
Yeah.
And so I think there is like a kind of a unique element to our show that, other, maybe like travel shows might not have that, a perspective from a child. And yeah, a lot of questions that we can all learn from. So
Yeah. The parent-child dynamic is really interesting, and I love Asher's questions. Did, did you come to this sort of without media experience? Like, your background is in the media, right? Tell us a little bit about that and how that kind of factored in.
yeah, absolutely. So growing up, I actually studied classical music composition. When I say classical, I mean like new age, jazz, you name it. So that's always kind of been in my background. So music is just really majority of my identity. I feel like I'm thinking about music, I'm always writing music in my head, and that's kind of been my entire identity since I was a child. I actually studied production management for theater at Carnegie Mellon University and the School of Drama there. So along with that, I was just instantly surrounded by just like raw hands-on production experience, right? Anywhere from really like stage management, acting, directing, to building sets and of course sound design as well, and lighting and things like that. I really was always obsessed with kind of like putting your hands, like directly in the work that you're producing, right? So really just like producer experience. I moved to New York City and worked for CBS News. And so that's where I got a lot of the live production experience, worked for NFL Today, and then also at Discovery Networks International. So doing so many different things in production, to be honest, like along the way, I felt a little lost, right? Because sometimes I'd be working in, I was in news marketing, right? Like trying to
Yeah.
find unique ways to get people to tune in to evening news that night, right? Or it would be, coordinating like meals for talent. And it would go from travel details to production, like live production experience, like trying to figure out how to get something on set with, the limited resources and the tools that we would have, budgeting. And then I also worked as a visual effects producer, right? So for post production. And so I knew eventually that I needed to choose one path. But one thing that I was sure about was that I loved the element of just creating from scratch. And so having all these like different network experience, it all kind of came together for Culture Kids, right? Because being an indie podcaster or indie content creator for anything, right? You really have to be willing to learn and soak up lots of information and use your past experiences from everything to put it together. And it's been fascinating, like every week producing different things, talking to different culture organizations, collaborating across different cultures and languages to legal, all of the things that I witnessed and, experienced in my past from TV production just kind of came together. No experience is ever wasted in production. That is 100% sure. This is why I tell every young person that's interested in TV or anything in production, take the experience. You will use it someday, I promise.
Yeah. I didn't realize you did it weekly. Wow.
Yeah,
So
we produce,
weekly
yep,
for
weekly episodes.
how long? I went looking for this and I had a hard time finding the answer. How long have you been doing it?
So Culture Kids launched end of like mid-October 2022.
Mhm.
We have not missed a single week of release. So
Kristen, that is incredible. I have to tell you, as a person doing this, I am so impressed. So weekly, and you make it with Asher, with your 8 year
yeah,
old son, who's been doing it
hmm
since he was 5, who
yes.
is a unique talent to manage, I'm sure. What how does how does that play out? Like is it the same as sort of managing the talent at CBS News? Is it distinct?
Well, that my experience of working with talent came mostly from CBS Sports, and
Oh,
yes,
even
and
better.
so
Okay.
and forward, yeah. Well, without going too much in details, I think the best. I don't want to say like advice, but one thing that I always keep in mind is that your talent needs to feel like that they're a very integral part of the creative process
Yeah.
from start to finish, no matter what age or
Yeah.
level of experience or how famous they are or how not famous they are, right? It doesn't matter. Like they all need to feel like this is their project, right?
Yeah.
And that, no one's just like telling that a producer or director isn't just like screaming things into their ear or their mic piece or whatever, in a network. But I think that with kids, especially when we're working with children, I think that a lot of people kind of forget to respect children. I know it's like such
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
simple
Yeah.
statement, right? But children are the most creative, like they are just brimming with ideas if you give them the safe space and really the time to help them to like think about it and to express it, right? Because children, their brain shut down when they don't feel like they're in a very safe, warm, inviting space. Giving children that space. And that's really a challenge to do with my son too, because like he's 8 and he has a lot of energy. He's a
Yeah.
very athletic kid, so he's like always kicking ball around and things like that. But I always try to make time with him, even with his very busy schedule. Like, oh, what do you think about that? Or like, if we're just like going to a museum or something, right? And I'm like, he'll be like, oh, this was so fun. And I'll be like, well, so do you think this would be a fun idea for an episode? And he'll be like, no, I don't know. He's like, it's not that funny for me, right? So it's like having these like conversations, like inviting like that creative space, with any
Yeah.
corporate organization, right? Like just making people feel included. I think that's a
Yeah.
big thing a lot of people tend to forget in fast productions.
That's incredibly meta, also about parenting and about working on a project
Yeah. Yeah.
with your son. What were some of the episodes that he was like most excited about? Do you have any that come to mind?
Hands down, that's not even a debate for Pokemon. So, anyone that's been listening to our episodes, like he will squeeze in every Pokemon reference like imaginable. Sometimes we have to edit it out because it's just like too random and then he gets like really upset, so we have to like negotiate. But
Yeah.
he wants to do a Pokemon episode like every few months, and actually our listeners really want to hear it too. It's just I want to like stay on brand, but Pokemon is a big cultural like
Totally.
icon, right? Like it totally is,
Yeah.
so it works. And so we're probably gonna do maybe like once or twice a year a series where we take our listeners on, like we transform as cartoons, as the anime, and then we go
Mm.
to one of the lands like in Pokemon and meet
Hmm.
the some of the Pokemons there and like learn about their evolution process and all of that. But he is fully hands on deck on that. Like he will rewrite the script. He'll be like, no, take that out. Like that's not a cool Pokemon. I don't know. So that,
Yeah.
yes, ends up being a lot more extra work though. So
Yeah. Well, and if you're on a weekly schedule, I'm sure that the balance there can be tough. I will confirm my daughter is 4, has been getting into Pokemon. I myself am like have been a fan for a long time, so it's not like I'm okay with
oh,
it.
okay.
But
Yeah.
but
What now?
certainly oh,
Yeah.
yeah, well, okay.
It gets expensive. All those cards. Oh my goodness.
Oh, the cards. I haven't told her about the cards yet.
Oh yeah.
But I think, there really is something to learning about another culture because it's clear it's a gateway to like, let's learn about Japan and let's learn about some of the things that this is based
Yeah.
on. And My Neighbor Totoro is something that we watch. And obviously, there's a
Oh,
lot of influences there. And the same thing has also happened for Bluey in Australia. So it's clear that there's like it's a gateway to other things, which is one of the things I love about the
right.
show, is that you think about it the same way. It's this holiday as a gateway to a bigger cultural discussion, and that's so interesting that he's putting his own spin on it.
Yeah, no, totally. Thank you for bringing that point up about having it be a gateway. I feel like as I'm, always thinking about our show and the episode and the brand, it's like what I love most about children is that how they marvel at everything, right? My daughter is 5, and for her, it's like taking a bath. Like she's like, "Oh, pretend I'm a mermaid," right? And then like everything is just so new and exciting. And what I try to do is like, how do we capture that, right? And sustain it, not just for kids, but for us as well, right? And to look at, an episode, I'm trying to think like hamburgers, right? And like hamburgers, it has complex history and like so many interesting facts from different cultures that, you know, led to what it is today, right? What we think is a simple dish is not, right? So we want to develop this mindset that everywhere you look, things have a story. There's something so amazing and magical and incredible about everything around us.
Yeah.
Sounds cheesy to an adult, but it's really how we can look at the world in such a positive and beautiful light. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it doesn't. Well, I don't know. It doesn't sound cheesy to me, and I think it's a real thing. You did also mention something earlier about kids sort of shut down when they don't feel like they're in a safe space to be sort of creative. And could you talk about some of the ways that you try to create that kind of environment? Because I think many parents listening, whether they're making a podcast or whether they're doing something else with their kids, like what do you do to try to keep that feeling, especially if you think like it might not be there at that moment?
I'll talk about like kind of the production elements
Sure.
that we really focus on. I think there's wording, right? Wording is everything with children, just speaking and studying this with so many different educators. Like I don't have a children's education background, but it's something that I've took great passion in and spoken to so many different educators and even, our children's like preschool teachers and even their teachers now. It's all about language. And I think it's providing that space where things aren't so black and white, right? And everything is child led, right? With that sense of curiosity and that wonder that we talked about, how they see the world as everything is just like, right? Like we don't need to take them to Disneyland for them to have that response and that reaction, right? So when we walk to school every day, from home in the morning. We live in like a very, typical like suburban neighborhood. And there's a house that always like plants different flowers almost like every week, it seems like. And we pass by it. And, no matter how tired I am, I always make sure to say to my kids, like, look at those beautiful flowers, you guys. Like, isn't it extra purple today? To just marvel at things, right? And my 8-year-old son, he goes, yeah, it's so beautiful. And now, my son, he's gotten in the habit of it for so many years that he'll look up at the cloud and be like, hey, mommy, look at those clouds, right? So just learning to help children kind of maintain that sense of awe and wonder, I really feel like provides that space for them to, stay creative and to look at things in, a new, different light. Sorry, that's not quite a production element, but, that's kind of the mindset that we cultivate, and that there's no I don't want to say right or wrong because there is a right or wrong, but anything when something is really different. Right now, like we're working on an episode with the Getty Museum, and it's going to be really probably released by the time this episode is
Oh,
out. But our guest talks about how like sometimes like the wealthy Romans would serve flamingo meat, right? And usually the reaction's like, right? But I was like, you know what? Let's not have like, oh, this is like a different, well, let's just say this is different because our show is about cultivating this idea that what is kind of like ew or like ew, stinky or whatever to different cultures that you're not used to. Let's phrase it as it's
sure.
different because when we use language like that, especially when we're trying to teach children, their brain automatically shuts down, right? Because if something is ew or yuck, right, their brain shuts down and it doesn't provide that safe space for exploration and learning anymore. And also music and sound effects, right?
Mm.
I think one of the most amazing things about audio learning is that we have the ability to really help children focus on music and the emotions that it may evoke when listening to something, right? So we play a lot of music that is very warm, a lot of like classical piano melodies that evoke a lot of different feelings. And, we have a lot of parents telling us that like, I tear up every time at the end of your episode because at the end we want children to feel as if, that they just went on this amazing adventure with people they love and that they're motivated and inspired to learn more, right? And for adults, it's a feeling that we don't often get. And we use music to evoke those emotions a lot. So, yeah, I'm sorry, that was a lot
Yeah.
of different things, but I had to
Well,
go on
well, I mean,
forever talking
I
about
hear,
this topic.
yeah, yeah. I hear a lot of intentionality and like noticing things about the world and pointing things out. And I can tell you sometimes it seems like they sort of roll their eyes and aren't that into it, and that's okay. You find another thing. And then I also hear in there, a desire to have kind of an openness to other cultures and looking for ways to do that. I am now thinking about whether flamingo meat is like chicken. I don't know. It could be.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I don't know. And then this point, I love the point about sound design because you're
Yeah,
right. Like it really changes the mood and the setting. And if things are getting tense in our house, sometimes we have a dance party and people seem interested in the dance party. And then sometimes you can talk about something a little bit more.
I love
And
that.
well, I mean, at this, yeah, my kids are 1 and 4, so I'm just like, well, what do I need to do?
Yeah.
But the intentionality that you're trying to bring, the feeling you're trying to create through Culture Kids, I think is something that many of us could think about. How could we employ, you know, sound design, intentional use of music? And maybe we're not learning in the same way if we're trying to
Mhm.
change the mood in a room, but still creating a feeling. You
Yeah,
mentioned
no,
a little
absolutely.
bit earlier about learning and audio learning. And we've focused on like feelings and production and how do you make this and all these other things. I don't know anything about audio learning. I don't know a lot about learning, period. What have you learned about audio learning and how are you bringing that into Culture Kids?
Yeah. So, nothing against screen time. Asher and Arden are watching their favorite shows on the weekends, 100%. But I
Yeah.
think I think it's much more than just like an alternative way of entertainment. To me, having studied music, and also I write, I used to a lot more before, but I write music as well on the side. Like our theme music is I wrote it as ours myself. And
Really?
I think, yeah, our culture groups theme is they hear at the beginning of every
Yeah.
episode. But I think that music, audio learning, right? You don't have to even be you don't even have to have your eyes open. You don't have to be looking at anything. It helps evoke sense of imagination and creativity. And I think with children, that's even so much more special because to us, we may already kind of have a set understanding of what something or someone might look like, right? But children don't, right? And it's just such an incredible way to help us battle stereotypes that we might, as adults, be used to, right? Like what someone or something might look like based on a description. But with children, they are there to form their own, imagination and own their own visuals. And so I think that's something very, very powerful and why I am such a big advocate of audio learning for children, right? It helps them to really imagine. It definitely helps with attention span. There's just no way that it won't help develop a child's brain, in terms of like comprehension. Asher's been listening to podcasts since he was like 1, right? And we haven't done anything really specific or extra with his like, reading or listening comprehension. But, he was reading chapter books, right? When he was like in first grade, and he can sit for hours. And now, he wants to listen to podcasts that are over like 20 to 30 minutes long, right? And I really think that there's something about having children, sit and listen for whether it's 5 to 10 minutes, and you can increase as you go. And it's just made such a massive difference for us, for our children. And there was a recent study that was published. I actually saw this from a post that KidsPod had made, which is a kids learning podcast learning app. They asked this question, like, do you think that audio learning and audio books or podcasts, kids podcasts, is the same as reading? And I was like, well, I don't know. And I, as I was like, I think so. I do, but I didn't read any science behind it. And the answer was, yes, it does work the same parts of your brain, of a child's brain, listening to an audio book or podcast as it does for when you're actually physically reading a book. So to me, I mean, that also just goes to confirm everything that we've all been kind of speculating about audio learning for so long. And yeah, I mean, I can go on forever about this, but I think that there's just so many incredible benefits. And I think that educators will catch up to this, if not already. But I do think that in the future, and I hope that it will be a more mainstream way of learning for a lot of children.
Yeah. My nephews are both big on audiobooks and have been for a long time. And there must be some sort of link between like reading to your kids and the benefits that has, and then someone else sort of reading to your kids in like a different kind of way. They're sharing material. And I could definitely imagine that that's distinct from, the like a multiple information feeds, visual and audio at the same time. And if nothing else, it's another option. And there are a lot of new,
Exactly.
devices that you can turn to if you want to. Your phone obviously could, play things, Bluetooth speakers attached to your phone. A lot of different options, I think, for parents. I don't know about Kids Pod, so that's an interesting one for folks to look at. Just anecdotally, watching my daughter come out of listening is distinctly different from watching her come out of watching something. The moods are really different, even if the something is a Sesame Street or something like Calm watching. It's different than watching her experience an audio, a podcast or an audio book or something like that. Anecdotes, some scientific information, and just, more things for parents to think about how to be intentional here.
Yeah. I found it so funny that, after pregnancy, after having both my kids, both pediatrician, they always recommend like talk to your baby, right? Talk to your newborn. Just talk, because they're listening and they're able to pick
Right.
up sounds and understand how things sound. I really hope that it'll kind of catch on to be one of the mainstream ways of children learn, and it's beyond entertainment. So
Yeah, totally. Well, I mean, as parents consume more audiobooks and podcasts, because that's been on the rise, potentially overtaking reading, which is, we can all have feelings about that. As that's on the rise, you start to realize, oh, there's kids options and there's other ways. Maybe I'm tired of talking and reading. Something else can help me, and there's nothing that's only helpful. So I have to ask, all of this, right? You're essentially working on like a group project, for lack of a better word, with Asher. Should other parents do this? Should other parents take on creating a podcast with their kids? My last guest also runs one, Children of the Force. Is this something that you think more parents should do?
absolutely. I mean, but with that, I will say, in our family, and doing things child-led is very important, right? Like, especially with projects and of course with like extracurricular activities. I'm a firm believer that with those things, that passion and that spark and that interest and curiosity really should be there first, right? We can never force our children, right, to do anything that they don't want to do, especially at this age.
Mm.
There are things that we have kind of told them, like, I'm sorry, like this, it's kind of a non-negotiable. Like, you do have to continue doing this, which is like taekwondo. We're Korean Americans. We just felt like it was like a lifestyle choice. And then the second one is piano, just because like I think that it's something that I grew up in and I was like, you guys will thank me later. At least just, learn the basics. But everything else, like, I think that it really does have to be child-led, and it does have to, like, that passion and that interest has to kind of be there. Highly recommend it because and if your child is interested, really, this is what I look forward to doing with Asher almost every week. Also because he and we don't have similar interests one bit. Like, he is soccer, basketball, chess, board games, like all things that I don't really enjoy doing at all, that my husband really loves, right? So we don't have a lot in common, but this is kind of like, a thing that Asher and I do, right?
Yeah.
And I have some things that I do with my daughter as well, but I just love this so much. And it's something that, I don't know exactly what the future will hold, but for me and Asher, but in terms of this, but it's just something that we have forever. And he loves it so much too. And he always listens to the episodes he produced when he was 5 years old, because, it's like hearing him, how he interacts on the show, it's just so fascinating to him. And it gives him a sense of pride and joy and sense of accomplishment. And it goes back to that, respect children thing, where they have so much to give. They have so much that they can create. They are, I think, the most amazing and creative beings on the planet. And we just have to give them the space to shine and guide them through that. So yes, if your child is interested and, they're showing curiosity for it, please, I hope so. And if anyone has questions listening, I'm here to answer them. So yeah, absolutely.
Fascinating. Yeah. Makes sense. I can imagine him being really proud and continuing to be proud moving forward. You mentioned the extracurriculars. You mentioned you think about screens, and this is obviously like a project too. How are you guys managing that? I think many parents listening are looking for, how do other people think about screen time, and what do they sort of allow, and when should they do it, and what shows? Maybe just a little bit about that would be useful for folks.
Yeah, as someone who worked in, various forms of entertainment, worked in TV, I think TV can be an incredible tool, especially for learning for children. But the way we approach it is we don't have screen time unless it's like homework related, Monday through Thursday. Friday, occasionally they'll watch TV, but that's very rare because we usually have like extracurriculars or events and things like that. Saturday and Sunday, if time permits, if we're just kind of home, they can have about like an hour and a half per day. So Saturday and Sunday. With that said, my husband's a little stricter about this, but yes, they they can choose what they want to watch, but we do try to encourage and guide them to watch things that will spark their brain, right? Like spark their brain power and not smush your brain, right? So we've had conversations with Asher, especially because now he just wants to like watch kids play video games on YouTube, right? Because he loves video games. And so we ask him, I'm like, how do you feel after this? Like, did you feel like you learned anything really interesting, or do you feel like kind of like your brain is a little mushed, right? And he now learned to kind of be like, well, now I know, Mom, how to unlock this level, and it takes a lot of brain power, I promise, right? And that's
They're
fine.
so smart. They're so smart.
Right? And that's fine. I have nothing against video games either. Oh, and by the way, that can be also substituted with his Switch time as well. So like if he wants Switch time for that 1 hour, then that's his choice, right? Usually now it's been more Switch. But my daughter's 5 and her favorite show is Emily's Wonder Lab and like Miss Rachel, right? But it was so crazy because I just took them to this like UCLA science fair event where like all these professors come and they teach kids about different like science, physics and things like that. There's like a PhD student and he had this like water bottle where if you connect it to two water bottles connected into one, And if you shake it a certain way, it'll form these like air bubbles or whatever, right? And I wasn't really paying too close attention, but he was like, "Oh, like, do you know why, it's creating this like circular motion air bubble, right?" And no one said anything. And my 5-year-old goes, "Hair molecules," right? And I was like, "Wait, what?" And he was like, "How did you know that?" And she goes, Emily's Wonder Lab. I was like, wow, so, nothing against, I think there is definitely amazing shows out there that you can watch and learn from, but it's just a matter of being intentional and not having it be a part of their lifestyle where, at an early age, they feel like the only way they can relax or the only way they can have fun or feel a sense of adventure is through TV. So that's what I'm trying to avoid.
Yeah. Well, I think one question folks might add or ask is, you know, Monday through Thursday, is it extracurriculars or is it, are they drawing after school or is it, how do you approach that?
Yeah, so our kids have a lot of interests and hobbies. So Asher, yes, after school, it's usually just all extracurriculars. They're in the extended care, but like they're picked up around like 3-ish. Asher's usually either doing basketball or soccer or taekwondo like once a week. Arden, my daughter does like gymnastics, skateboarding, like she does it with her friends. I'm just a firm believer of extracurriculars and hobbies. And someone said this to me when I was in my 20s, and it kind of stuck with me for the rest of my life. Like when children don't have hobbies or do, at least some level of like extracurricular activities, they grow up into adults not having hobbies. And, I think that's a bit of a dramatic statement, but I do see where that statement comes from because I want to get in a habit of making my children, and all children feel like that there's so much to learn and enjoy in this world, right? Whether
Yeah.
it's sports or arts or skateboarding, right? Instead of just, sitting at home and doing your homework and studying for a test or something. That's what we're trying to cultivate in our family. They try a lot of different things. Yeah.
That's great. Skateboarding for the 5-year-old. My daughter would love
Yeah.
that. I need to talk to her about it.
So much fun.
So, Kristen, you outlined, a lot of extracurriculars. And I hear as a parent, that's a lot to take my kids to. And my kids are younger, they need a little more sort of hand holding in these activities, but every night taking them to something different sounds like a lot. How have you managed that on top of producing a show a week and everything else?
Yeah, and I should clarify that this wasn't always the case until this past year. And, it's because our children are a little bit older, right? And Arden, my younger one, doesn't have something every single day. It's really just my son who's in third grade, right? Who's kind of has a more of an identity now and, is able to figure out what he loves and doesn't love. So one of the things that my husband and I consciously worked on the last maybe like year and a half or 2 years is that we made it a goal to get to know as many neighbors and families that are in our neighborhood, like within like the 3, 4, 5 block radius. And much to our surprise, because we moved here only about 2 years ago. And at first, the first year, I didn't really feel like I fit in here. But much to our surprise, like there's just so many families that have similar schedules, both like dual working families, my husband and we're always kind of like working around the clock or doing different
Yeah.
projects. So, and there's so many families like us, and we've now have about a circle of maybe 5 or 6 families that we kind of take turns coordinating for rides. So my
Yeah.
son, I don't have to pick him up from school today or Wednesday, but on Tuesday I'm picking up their kids. So we have like spreadsheets between parents and families
Yeah.
about
Yeah. Yeah.
camp, about extracurricular activities when the families are going on vacation. And so now it's come to a point where like our neighbor down the street, if they're going on like a 2-week long vacation, I'm like, oh no.
You lost part of
And
the
we
village.
go,
Part of the
right, I'm
village
like,
is going on vacation.
exactly. I'm like, you didn't tell me that it was going to be there. But it's just, I love it so much because it's that concept of village, right? And it's what we learn
Yeah.
about in our show all the time about indigenous communities, their concept of community and village. And you can create that village, but you have to be that village yourself too. And that's the hard part for people because it takes a lot of like, courage to be like, hey, like, do you guys want to come over for dinner? Or, like it's just, it feels awkward sometimes, but we really made it a point to do that. And it has been life changing. Like we only do about, half the pickup and drop offs. And
Yeah, yeah.
sometimes if we're in a bind, I could just ask my, at least like 3 or 4 neighbors on my blog, be like, hey, do you mind like, can Arden just stay there for, like 2 or 3 hours? Done, of course. And I know that that favor is going to be, asked of me for sure.
Right.
And I'm more than happy to do it. So, highly encourage that. I know it's so hard and it feels awkward. And that beginning stage, I kind of dreaded it with a passion and it can be scary, right? But, you got to do it. And your kids will grow up in a neighborhood where they feel like they are safe to go over to, X, Y, and Z's house. And it's great. It's life changing. It really
Yeah, yeah. Well,
I can't
and
do it
you
without them.
you you will feel like you can send them somewhere else, which then gives them like space and like the just open sort of exploration time. I love that point though. You like 5 or 6 families and it
Uh-huh.
took you like a year or two. And I don't know how long it will take other people. I don't know whether that's the right number, but just as a starting point for it, you don't need to befriend an entire community. You need like 5 or 6 families, and then it can alleviate the burden of some of these things and
Right.
create these. To be honest, even if they're watching TV together, at least they're together, like they, or
That's
on the
the thing.
Switch
Yeah,
together. Yeah.
exactly. No, there's a lot of Switch play dates. That's oh yeah, Asher's very passionate about Switch play dates.
But I mean, it's an incredible connection point as well. We
It
may have
is. Yeah,
different feelings about video games too, but like it is a way that
exactly.
people connect, and it's a social currency. And um, yeah, I love that point because I heard extracurriculars every night, and I'm thinking, oh no, that's on top of everything else. I think it's attainable. I think that's a really good blueprint.
Well, and here's something that I didn't see coming because I was like, there is no way my kids, like with my TV production background, like, no way. Like that's not a thing. But you will see like taekwondo. I would always joke with our taekwondo, the master. He's always like, we work, welcome to your we work, right? Because they have the best Wi-Fi at the taekwondo studio. So I bring in my
Yeah.
noise cancellation phones and I bring my laptop. Really, like a quarter of our episodes were edited at the taekwondo All Rise Martial Arts. Thank you so much, Master Richard. Like I bring it, and that's where I get my editing, my email catch up, and you will see like a row of parents doing the same, either in their cars, right, or
Yeah.
there, right? So, if you're doing, and eventually it'll be drop offs. Like my son's soccer and basketball is hour and a half. That's hour and a half till 5:30 or 6 p.m. that you can get stuff done or make dinner, or whatever, right? I think it's different when they're younger or 4 or 5
Yeah,
and
yeah,
you have
yeah.
to actively be there.
Well,
Then
and
oh
every
gosh,
every
no,
family is different, every community is
yeah,
different, but I think there is really something to this idea that you don't have to do it alone. And
never, yeah,
the intentional sort of like connection to other parents, being their village, because we all want people to be there for us. We can be there for other people is an incredible message. And I just appreciate that you spelling out like how you did it for people. I think people find that
yeah,
interesting.
and be the village first, you know.
Yeah.
Like I got sorry, we'll share one more short story, but I was really sick this week and it was really tough. Just, I had to get this episode done it by the end of the week for approval. And, my son had, yeah, it was just a lot of stuff going on. And my neighbors brought food. Two of my different neighbors fed they brought food for the kids and some soup for me. And like that was just so amazing. I think they were like, you did this a while ago when my husband got sick. I think it's just really hard to make that first step and it feels really awkward, right? And
Yeah.
it might not work out and it might not be successful and they might be people that you don't vibe with, but be the village first.
But maybe
That's
you
how it
will.
starts.
Maybe you
Yeah.
will. Maybe you'll
Yeah,
vibe.
exactly. Most likely you will. Yeah.
Most likely you'll
Yeah.
vibe. So what are you excited about in tech right now? Like it's an interesting time with artificial intelligence that hasn't come up at all. I'm really sorry I'm bringing it up now. It's an interesting time with new devices. You know, I discovered the Culture Kids through the Yodo. What are you into? Like what are you excited about and optimistic about here?
Yeah. Obviously there's concerns, right? But I'm actually really excited because I think it's a time where a lot of people are talking about, okay, screens are great, right? Like there's what I mean, I don't want to say great, but like, there's screens that's there and that's been there for a long time. But I think people are now starting to have conversations about how to integrate entertainment and education in a way that's not just watching something, right? So,
Hmm.
Yodo, an amazing, amazing, amazing tool for children to kind of feel like they have that ownership, within what they're listening to, right? The cute buttons and everything in the cards. And then there's like Tony's Story Pod, I think is a new one, right? They have these like cute little like stuffies that you put in and then they make these, little stories and things like that. There's now, people are coming up with toys where it's like more hands-on and audio focused, right? I think it's actually a really exciting time. And I know that, our board Culture Kids, like we're trying to always think of ways like our next step. How do we extend this experience beyond just audio, right? Without taking away the imagination part. There could be puppets, there could be, so many different learning elements that we can incorporate that's entertaining, and educational at the same time. So I'm really
Yeah.
excited. There's a lot of potential here. There's a big black space. And I think it's time for entrepreneurs to get really creative.
Yeah. Am I gonna get monthly Culture Kids puppets? Is that gonna happen?
That would be
I
so fun. Yeah, that's something. Yeah, there's too many ideas.
Yeah,
Yeah, that,
sorry,
that's
sorry,
that's our
sorry.
problem. That's our problem. There's too many ideas. Yeah.
It is challenging though. And I love you brought up the industrial design of the Yodo and these different devices because you entice them with the like it looks different. It's a different kind of experience. And there's so many form factors that could be part of it. There's so many ways to be creative. I love that. Very, very interesting time. Kristen, it's incredible to talk with you. Thanks for being on. I look forward to the next episode.
Yes, please stay tuned. We have so many fun episodes coming up. Lots of great collaborations.
Thank you.